When I started doing hair transplant surgery 28 years ago, we used to say hair transplant surgery is 80% art and only 20% surgery. I feel in recent times it's been more technical, more surgery, less attention paid to the artistry of it and the naturalness of it. And my talk in this Congress is about emphasizing that point. How do you create the look of more with less? For us hair transplant surgeons, the general idea is to create a look that the patient can get with the limited resources we have, making sure, number one, it looks natural, and number two, trying to make the best we can with the number of hairs. So what I'm shedding light on, if you like, is how do you put the grafts right next to each other in a manner that looks random, that looks consistent, yet does not look regimented. Therefore, you cannot tell that you've had a hair transplant. In my practice, for example, if a patient comes to me and says, people are asking him if he's had a hair transplant, I would find that very upsetting, because that means they recognize it's a transplant. They recognize that it wasn't always there. In fact, the typical reaction people get is, you know, have you done something with your hair? They don't recognize it as transplant. And the reason for that, because they don't see a pattern. A lot of times now I see pictures online, and especially places where people just do grafts for the sake of grafts, is that you can tell it's a transplant. You can see lines, you can see patterns. There's not enough randomity. What I'm talking about is, and what I was always taught when I first started doing this 28 years ago, is you need to interdigitate the grafts. You need to create triangles when you're talking about the relationship of grafts to one another, rather than squares. And I am giving an example. I actually use Jenga pieces to demonstrate my point, and I lined up row after row after row of Jenga pieces, these wooden pieces behind each other, and no matter how many you put, you can still see light through and you can still see columns. Whereas if you put them in between each other and just put a few lines, suddenly you almost see a solid wall, and the patient looks like they've got much more depth to their hair. So the idea of how the hairs relate to each other, blocking light, create more shadow, contribute not only to a natural result, but with a lesser number of grafts, you can give the same effect as unnecessary thousands.